Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the Kaba Ilco number 185-2. This is an NH lock deadbolt body by Kaba Ilco. The name Kaba Ilco is synonymous with probably key blanks, I would think, to the average person. Maybe the name is familiar for Kaba, and then Ilco, independent lock company. I think of Kaba Ilco certainly as key blanks because they are a market dominator in key blanks. What I really prefer from them most are their high quality cylinders. Their brass mortise rim cylinders, key and knob, key and lever, key and knob and lever, key and knob, lever, and deadbolt cylinders. But key blanks are certainly a big portion of what they do. And some aluminum storefront hardware, as we're about to see. In the box is going to be the business end of the part number, the lock body itself. You can hear that rattling. I'm going to discuss that in a moment. There's nothing loose back here that I could find. A couple of mounting screws you're going to need. And installation instructions. They're linked to down below. Scan of that actual paperwork is there. So this is the 185. The 185 from Kaba Ilco means it's a deadbolt, is just simply the bottom line. And using my fingers to emulate a tail piece, get that bolt to throw. That's a deadbolt. That's a laminated construction of pieces of steel, zinc plated for corrosion resistance. A typical generic size for the aluminum storefront industry. Okay. What sets this apart is that from other generic typical aluminum storefront industry is that rattling, as far as I know. When I first got the lock, I studied it for 5 minutes. I studied it till these parts started to move on me like a mirage. And I finally realized, well, there's nothing loose inside of here. And I probed it with a magnet, with really high-powered magnifying glasses. And it finally dawned on me that I was able to isolate, well, it's got to be coming from the bolt. And this order you can't see them all, but there's 8 of them on this order. Well, they all did that. And I had never seen this Kaba Ilco bolt before. And I thought, well, I bet you that it's by design and that it's an anti-saw bearing, because anti-saw measures are very common within the door hardware industry. Whether it be a cylinder that is that a high security cylinder that has a hardened steel inside of the face at the shear line, or bearings inserted that are hardened steel. Very common. You know, you've got high security cylinders and you're going to try to drill that shear line. Yeah, the manufacturer is going to make it as hard as possible on you to do that, including inserting bearings in safes. You can very often, and I'm not an expert on safes. I'm not an expert on anything, but certainly not safes. But in the safe industry, the walls of that door construction, they can be packed with bearings. So that you're drilling through the relatively mild outer area, you're going to hit something that's not mild, and sometimes that's bearings. And those bearings really can work havoc, of course, on your saw. Well, a real typical attack is going to be this door, outswing application, not a problem. Let me get my Sawzall. And within pretty quick, you're going to have it open. Well, not that you're not going to not get it open with an anti-saw bearing in it, but the point is to make it not as easy. And from my perspective, and hopefully from yours, the point of Kaba Ilco doing it is to help differentiate themselves from other people. You want a generic lock that's, got an upgrade in terms of anti-saw? Of course you do. And here it is, by Kaba Ilco. So this family of locks are deadbolts, standard throw, and short throw. There are hook bolt. There is a hook bolt. And there is an ANSI version of the hook bolt as well. There are 3 different back sets of these locks. Let's start to tackle this part number. So before we get to the installation instructions, let's tackle the cut sheet, because that will give us an intro into the lock itself. And that link is definitely down below this video. Page 1 is going to allow you to look at the 4 variations. This is the 185, garden variety 185. This is going to have an overall height of the lock body at about 6 13/16. It's going to have a width of the lock body about 15/16, maybe 31/32. Depth of the lock body without the faceplate about 1.5 inches. Projection of the bolt without the faceplate looks like it's about 1.5 inches. About 1 inch and 5/16 tall. Yeah. Thickness about 9/16. Now, speaking of 31/32, that's the backset of this, and that's what the 2 in the part number stands for. This is a -2 version, right? That means it's 31/32 of an inch from the edge of the door to the center of the hole. Now, what you're seeing here, 31/32, that is just one tiny line on my tape measure. That's one micro line, the smallest line below 1 inch. Well, you can see this is way past that, or way short of that, I should say. That's because there's no faceplate. Okay, this would be kicked out about 1/8 of an inch, and now when I bias that out about 1/8 of an inch, you're going to be at that 31/32. There are different sizes of these, and you have to order the right size or understand the right size of what you're working on. So what I mean by that is, if you're going to install a lock for someone, an application might be having, not unheard of, not uncommon, client has an electric strike and a dead latch. Very easy to tamper that open. Very easy to lloyd. Lloyding is the term that's used to jimmy a lock open. Well, client calls his hardware guy, his locksmith, whomever, and says, you know what, when I leave at night, I want to leave at night. I want to lock it, secure it. So they'll say, give me a second deadbolt, a second lock, a deadbolt this time, up above or below, whatever. So your job is to know what backset to order. Obviously, the first thing that you might do is just match the existing, so the holes are in alignment. You might also not have that ability, and you might need to do an audit or or scrutinize the door opening. A 31/32 is a pretty short backset. That hole for that cylinder is going to be 1.25 inches, sometimes 1 3/16. So half of 1.25 inches is going to be 5/8. My point is, 31/32 minus 5/8 is where the edge of that hole is going to be to the edge of the door. What's the projection of your blade stop or your stop on your frame? So be mindful to lay all that out before you decide what size you need. It might not work. The cylinder might be too close, depending on the frame construction. Also, what you have to know when you're determining a backset, a lot of people call and say, I need a replacement storefront lock body. Okay, what's the backset? I have no idea. Well, it's the edge of the door to the center of the hole. Okay. What I usually tell people is, listen, it's either obviously 1 inch or less, meaning it's not anything more than 1 inch, or, so if we're trying to figure out 31/32 or 1 1/8, where I tell the client it's clearly more than 1 inch. So that usually works. And if it's a greater backset, like 1.5 inches, well, that's pretty easy to say, well, it ain't 1 1/8, so it has to be 1.5 inches. But more discussion is necessary when it comes to defining the backset. There are 3 different ways that a door could present itself to you in an aluminum storefront opening. And they're all common. They're all doors that have to be considered. Square edge, beveled edge, radiused edge. That can be available in single doors or pairs of doors. So the backset. If the backset's the dimension from the edge of the door to the center of the hole, where I put my tape measure on this side of the door or on this side of the door doesn't matter. Where I put my tape measure here or here absolutely matters. Where I put my tape measure here matters. Both sides are the same, but what about this radiused end? Well, the center of the door is actually defined as the center of the thickness of the door. Sorry, that line's a little curvy there, but it's the center of the thickness. So if you're measuring a beveled edge door, be mindful. If you're measuring the small side of the door, which would be the push side of the door, you're going to get a real different dimension than when you go to the other side of the door and measure it. So be mindful that it's from the center of the thickness of the door. And I think the reason that they define it that way is because Backset needs to work across all door types of construction. So what do all door types of construction in terms of their edge profiles have in common? Well, the center of the door. That's also handy because now I don't care what the thickness of the door is either. It's measured from the center of the door. If it's a beveled edge door, that bevel is defined typically as 3 degree. Or it's 3 degree, which is also defined as 1/8 in 2. That means for every 2 inch of thickness, you're going to have a difference of 1/8 of an inch. So if your door is 1 3/4, which it probably is, you're not going to be quite at 1/8 of an inch difference, just a little bit less. But the reason they do that is because, well, if you had an 1 3/8 door, you really don't care about it's 3 degree. You don't have to worry about the size. 2 1/4 aluminum storefront, not common, but they exist. So when you're measuring this stuff, be mindful that you have to measure from the center of the thickness of the door and not from either side. Now that's really helpful to know. When you order the right lock, you realize, yeah, 1 1/8 is a good Backset and it's going to be a beveled edge door. Now when you go to the job, before you carefully mark and center punch your hole to start the drilling process, you put your tape measure on a beveled edge door and go to 1 1/8 and you mark it. Open the door up, come around, 1 1/8 and mark it. You drill those holes, guess what? They're not in alignment. You have to adjust both of them to be to be in alignment with each other. Same concept if you're putting in a door viewer or you're installing a light kit. If a door is beveled or radius, you have to be mindful of that. Also, you have to be mindful of it because there's usually not a lot of margin around a mortise cylinder for this kind of stuff, so you need to be pretty close to being spot on. Okay. Now, the product catalog talks about the straight bolt and the hook bolt. The hook bolt is defined there. First of all, the short throw deadbolt, I don't know what its dimension is. This was 1 1/2. I'm going to say that short throw is going to be about 2/3 of that, so maybe about 1 inch would be my guess. They don't define it, unfortunately. Now, bolts like this are used on swinging doors. There would be nothing preventing this from sliding apart. Okay, not for sliding doors. If you had a door that was sliding, even though it's the wrong hardware to use for a sliding door, that hook bolt will come in and grab the preparation in the frame and prevent you from spreading or sliding the door open. Now, you wouldn't put that onto a sliding door because the mouth, if this was the hook bolt, there'd be a preparation in here. The width of the mouth of the hook is too great. You'd be able to slide the door in and out a little bit, like 3/8 of an inch. That obviously wouldn't do to have that sort of play in the door. But the reason people use hook bolts is it prevents people, it helps prevent people from spreading the frame. And what that means is you've got a door, and let's say that door is 3 foot. Let's say it's nominally 3 foot. Well, what if I come up to the job with a 37-inch or a 37-inch 2x4 and put that in the frame, mallet it down. Now I've got a belly in the frame, and I just push the door open. That's a lot to spread to get this to clear, but it's been done, no doubt. The short throw would be counterproductive to solving that problem, except you're going to use a short throw if you don't have the room to throw this much bolt out. So you'd use a short model. You could certainly have an application where your jambs are really petite, like a 1-inch profile, and you just can't fit this in, so they go with a short version of it. Use that hook bolt when you're concerned about somebody spreading that door open. And it can happen, especially in areas where there's, like at night, there's no traffic, there's no one around. You can be all but completely concealed while you're working on manipulating a door open. Go with a hook bolt. It's a good option to keep that from spreading open. Then there's an ANSI version of the hook bolt, and that just simply means rather than that 6 13/16, it's going to be 8-inch tall. It's going to fit into what we would call an 86 edge of a mortise lock for a hollow metal door. Now, these locks are not commonly used in hollow metal doors, but they can be. I've sold this material to people that were doing wood doors or steel doors, and the reason they are using it in those atypical door types, not aluminum storefront, is because it actually solves the problem elegantly. It's inexpensive, it's effective, okay? It can be made to work, and you don't want to see any of the hardware. So in this application, with an ANSI hook bolt, in that same scenario where you have the alley, not a lot of traffic, I could park there basically and just sit there for an hour and play with your door. A hollow metal door, hollow metal frame, 86 edge, hook bolt. All I'm presenting you from the outside might be nothing, no cylinder because it's exit only. You're not going to spread it. I don't know if there's an anti-drill pin in there, but my suspicion is that there is. If they have room for it, I would think very much that there would be. So I think that'd be a good way to go about securing that door. And again, you do it in a relatively inexpensive way. These locks are not that expensive. It would take utter destruction of this lock to force that bolt down when it's in the locked position. The only thing that will do it is when the tailpiece hits that roller, or in this case my two fingers, to act as a tailpiece, to depress them to get it to lock down. Okay. I used to be able to do it with one finger. I think my fingers got shorter in life. And if you saw that, it clicks into that area, and then it locks and parks there, not allowing you to get it open again. So when it comes up like that, that's where it's staying secured. Okay. Now, on page 1, it shows some general outlines of how you're going to machine and mortise stuff. And they do list it as a grade 1, ANSI grade 1 standard, which means it's past 1 million cycles of operation. 1 million. Who knows how many million it hit? It just has to hit 1 million to be grade 1. That's the highest grade. Page 2 will give you more dimensional properties. They don't show the... oh, they do. Okay, so the short throw is 0.93 inch. So I was about right. It's about 1 inch is the projection of the short throw. That's on page 2. I had missed that earlier. Calls out the 3 back sets, 31 32nds, inch and an eighth, and inch and a half. The table on the bottom of page 2 shows you how to build the part number. It's either a 185, a 185 ST for short throw, a HB 185, or an HB 185 SN. That SN is terminology that could be understood in the industry to mean ANSI prep. It'll fit that mortise lock preparation. That's the A column of the part number. The B column is going to be where you would define your faceplate if you have one. Leave it blank if you don't want a faceplate. And we're going to talk more about the faceplate in a moment. The C section is going to be where you define your back set, number 2, 3, or 4. D is the handing. Now this is an NH, non-handed. That's because there's either no faceplate, which there isn't in my part number, or it's a faceplate that's not handed, meaning a flat or a radius. But if it's a beveled faceplate, or forgive me, if it's a beveled or a radius with a weather strip, now you have a handed lock. You have to define the hand. You cannot use NH if you have a beveled or the RW, the radius with weather strip, because the bevel is this way or this way. The radius with weather strip is either weather strip here or weather strip here on either side of the bolt. Then, of course, the finish is the E part. This is a no faceplate, so there's no finish required. And then if you see IP, that just means it's individually packaged. Now let's move to the installation instructions. Now the installation instructions are indeed included, but I've scanned them and uploaded them here to the site. You're going to see the preparation that is required in the edge of the door for the lock body. Okay. What they're really showing you in the style preparation, upper right-hand corner, is these bolts. They're just going to go through the lock body and then be threaded into a hole that's drilled and tapped on the inner wall of the aluminum storefront door. That may be okay. That might be how you have it. You might need mounting tabs. You might need mounting posts where you need to be able to run your bolt through here, but your cavity is unusual. and that the lock needs to be captured from the underside of the post to the back of the wall. So you would have a bolt there. What's providing the post function on this is the back of the lock body. So as long as this is going to bury against the back of the lock body, you can tighten that bolt to the inner wall of the stile. You're in good shape. You might need a different mounting method. We can help you with that stuff. There are no dimensions that I see for the SN, the ANSI version, at all, unfortunately. Page 2 of the installation instructions is just in a different language, so we're going to be on page 1. The important thing is if you're going to be drilling a preparation in the field, we talked about the accuracy of the backset. You've got your height, you've got your width. Nothing really to talk about there. What you have to know is to where to put the hole vertically in relationship to the edge prep. That dimension is given, 1.6 inch. From the top of the edge prep down to the center of the hole. The backset you already know. Now the next critical thing is, where do I put the prep in the frame? If you have a bolt, a deadbolt or the short throw deadbolt, you're going to make that beaker shaped preparation in the frame or in the edge of the inactive door. The reason it's wider at the bottom is because as you take the bolt and throw it, you want it to enter the widest portion of the cutout. And then as it continues to come up, it is being restricted by a thinner cutout, which will then draw the door and frame tight together. Okay, bring it into alignment. And that will give you what you need. They give you the height, the width, top and bottom, and then the height of where it stays, 0.68 inch. The important part of that is where to locate that in relationship to where the cylinder is, and that's the B dimension. And that will be different based on whether it be a regular deadbolt or the hook bolt, because where these need to communicate with the prep and the frame or the inactive door is inherently different because of that hook bolt shape going to be different as well. The bottom of page 1, right-hand corner, does define for us from the factory this principle, which is nice. This lock will work with any cylinder that has an MS, maximum security, an Adams Rite trademark cam, or an Adams Rite cam. The dimensions are there if you're not sure if your cam is going to work. You might be throwing a Yale lock into this, and you might need to compare the dimensional properties of the cam required with Yale's dimensional property of their available cams. They certainly have an Adams Rite cam available for you. Lots of other dimensions that are on there that we have no need to go over. Finally, there's a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Kaba Ilco products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog for the storefront hardware, which is handy. They get into more than just lock bodies. They've got paddles and things of that nature. They can also assist you with, on that manufacturer's page, the Kaba Ilco key blank catalog, which is an indispensable resource of items as it pertains to key blanks for not only door hardware, this area that we're talking about, but automotive. Lots of specialty stuff. They still make bit and barrel keys, which a lot of people would just know as a skeleton key. They make flat steel keys that you're going to use in safe deposit box locks, mailbox locks. All these things exist. We don't encounter them very much here in our business, but a lot of people do, is the bottom line. If you've got an apartment building in the northwest side of Chicago built in 1918, you better believe it that there's going to be a lot of original skeleton key style latch sets on those bedroom doors in those buildings. New York City, absolutely everywhere. Older cities is where you'll see that hardware. So Kaba Ilco makes those keys available because what are you going to do? Replace the entire door because you lost an inexpensive key? So they're still available. Then there's the brass cylinder catalog that's there as well that will allow you to review all things cylinder related from Kaba Ilco. Like I said earlier, mortise cylinder, rim cylinder, etc. Any questions on the Kaba Ilco? This is their 185 and a 2 back set. Deadbolt for aluminum storefront or any other Kaba Ilco product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.